go with that.
Yeah?
Let me go with that. That helps all of us.
Sure.
That helps us.
It does. Just sit in front. We'll call you. And I'll just like move to the side. Oh my God. I didn't bring my... Tita, meron kang ano? May Kleenex ka? Jen, may Kleenex ka? May Kleenex ka?
Take your mic off, okay?
Oh.
Friends, we're going to be starting in 10 minutes. We'll be starting this next plenary in 10 minutes. Feel free to pass the word to your siblings. We're going to start at 3:30.
Mic test.
Take it from there. You introduce yourself. Good afternoon, friends. We are entering into our next plenary, which has been titled Advocacy in the Post-GC2024 Church. And I'm excited about the discussion that we're going to have this afternoon. Before we go into introductions and the content, just want to make a quick announcement. This afternoon, after we're done in the plenary, we will go into some more constellation / breakout discussions. And then we're going to gather at the university foyer, which is over at the hotel, the concourse, at 7:15 for a VIP reception. And if you hadn't already gotten the message, you are the VIPs. So if you're like, I don't know who the VIP folks are, it's you. It actually is you. And so if you don't show up to the VIP reception, it might not be a VIP reception. Do we get that? Yeah? Yeah. So VIP reception, for those that the VIP reception is for, is at 7:15. And then at 8 p.m., we'll start our gala. And the gala includes a full dinner. Okay, and you paid for it, or someone paid for it already, right? Like, it's a part of your registration. Like, so I'm not one to leave food on the table. Like, it's not like how I'm wired. I don't know about you, but when I invite you to do what you need to do so that you can take advantage of the beautiful dinner that we will have together tonight as we celebrate so much of what this movement's about. So that's all the announcements I was asked to give. Izzy, I'm passing it to you.
Okay, so we're going to introduce ourselves. I'm going to introduce myself. I am Izzy Alvaran, he, him, his pronouns. I am an immigrant from the Philippines, and I currently live in Berkeley, California, formerly from the Philippines Annual Conference, and as of last year, a clergy member in the California Pacific Conference. I have a new position or job at RMN. I used to do organizing work for the Western jurisdiction in North Central. Now I am the director for United Methodist Connections. I am also a member of the Connectional Table of the United Methodist Church, which is kind of our denomination's church council, and representing the Western jurisdiction.
Awesome. My name is Derrick Scott III. I am a gay black man from the Florida Conference. I have been in campus ministry for over 23 years now, and so I do that full time in the Florida Conference. I'm also the co-lay leader of the Florida Conference, and I work part time for the Texas Methodist Foundation in their Learning and Innovation Department. What else was I supposed to say about myself? I am a member of the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters. That's a permanent committee of the General Conference. And I'm also on the board of RMN, and one of the roles that I play on the board is chairing the Relations Committee, and we relate a great deal, actually a lot, to the work that Izzy does. So again, this conversation, it's called Advocacy in the Post-GC2024 Church. Another way for us to talk about this is a family conversation about how we, as the reconciling movement, find ourselves in the United Methodist Church today. Which, let's start with the good news. We are in an unprecedented day. Like, we didn't think we'd ever get here. And some of us didn't think here. Some of us were like, oh, we're gonna get here one day. Some of us like, I don't know, guys, I don't know. Like, but I just a few, and we've been celebrating, and we need to keep celebrating, by the way. We need to keep celebrating the gains that we have made. We need to keep acknowledging that God has brought us a mighty long way, amen? Amen. And keep naming and being joyful about where we have come as queer folk and allies in the United Methodist Church. Because friends, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? If we're not celebrating, nobody is going to do it for us. Just a few of the wins, and we've been, again, celebrating all weekend. We had a historic number of queer delegates at General Conference in 2024 and at jurisdictional conferences. Amen? Yeah, I think that's a hand clap. I do think so. We have an historic number of queer folks who are representing us on general boards and agencies throughout our connection. Yes, yes. That's cool. Somebody else maybe will celebrate for us. I don't know. And one more stat here. We have, and I guess this matters to me, I think, an historic number of United Methodists who are at the very least willing to be on a journey. They're willing to be on a journey of figuring out how to honor the image of God in us as LGBTQIA individuals. We have made so many wins. And I think we want to acknowledge that even as the United Methodist Church is evolving, we as a movement are also evolving. We are not the same movement. And so it's really interesting, you know, the first plenary that we had, and you know, trying to get us all excited and riled up, which I tried to do just a few moments ago, and that didn't work so well. But anyway, keep moving. I asked if anybody was at the 1987 Convocation, and we didn't have any names at that point. Maybe somebody has walked in that was there. But here's what I know. I wasn't there. I was 7 years old in 1987. There's a few of us who weren't actually on the planet in 1987, and many of us were still in the closet in 1987, right? And so obviously the movement is different in 2025. The movement is different post-GC. The movement is different because of the current administration. And so the question is, like, how are we evolving as a movement? How are we living into that evolution? And sometimes it's welcomed. Sometimes we say yes to those evolutions. And sometimes they are so paradigm shifting that we don't know how to say yes. So again, I've been in campus ministry over 23 years, and one of the things that comes with campus ministry is having a conversation with a parent who comes to me and they say, Derrick, would you make my kid do fill in the blank? And my response is no, because these are human beings who are learning their own agency and responsibility, and so I will not make them do anything. But I do invite you to think about what your new role is in their life. Parenting 2.0 is so hard. Any parents in the room who know what I'm talking about? I've watched you. It's so hard because this human that you have poured so much into for 18 plus years is now making decisions and not asking if you're okay with it. And now that relationship with this human is changing. They didn't ask you if it was okay to change. It is changing. And so the role of the parent is to figure out how they come alongside this human who now has agency and autonomy. That's an example, I think, of where we are right now. The church is changing, at least our policies are changing. Obviously, there are things that have not changed that we need to see changed. And so we as a movement want to really think about, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us as a movement? How are we now evolving to be who God is calling us to be? How are our roles? Our roles individually, but our role as RMN's movement. How are we evolving to meet this moment? And I'll just say that I don't know what it means. We're going to talk about some things. Again, we're going to have a family meeting in many ways. We're going to talk about what we see sort of in the next iteration of the United Methodist Church, and therefore what the next iteration of the reconciling movement might need to look like. That's also what we're trying to do with the strategic plan, by the way. The strategic plan is not like this thing, like we know exactly what we look like from 2025 to 2028. All we're trying to do is position ourselves to be who we need to be for the church that is different now and for the world that is different now, so that we can play our role as a movement. That's why Izzy and Laura and Helen and the whole team, their roles, literally, their job descriptions have changed because we do need to evolve. Is that okay? Yeah. So I'll just say this, and then I'm going to pass it to Izzy. I'm a scripture guy. I'm always looking to the text to get my bearings, to figure out what the heck I'm doing. And one of the scriptures that continues to just resonate in my mind as I was even preparing for this plenary, Revelation 7. And I'm just going to read just a little bit of it for you. Revelation 7, verse 9. After this I looked, and there was a great crowd that no one could number. They were from every nation, tribe, people, language, and now we get to Derrick Revised Standard Version. It's going to be okay. And gender, and expression, and family structure, and theology. Extroverts and introverts were there too. They were all there standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And I just invite you later to go and grab your Bible app or your physical Bibles and read the rest of it. But it ends with them all singing the same song. And friends, I do not know how that's going to happen. I don't know how you get people from different nations, tribes, peoples, sometimes different genders and expressions and family structures and extroverts and introverts all together and singing the same song at the end of it all. I don't know how that happens, but what I am convinced of, my relationship with Jesus convinces me to say yes to that vision. To say yes to that vision and to say yes to being on a journey of Jesus getting us there. And I think that our role as advocates, our role as reconcilers in the continuing United Methodist Church is to say yes to that kind of vision. Okay, Izzy.
I love it that you said that our church is growing up. In fact, one of our bishops from the Philippines said that we're not growing apart because people were afraid of regionalization as us growing apart and having our own regions, and we don't care about each other. But he said, we're not growing apart, we are growing up. Now, I was born into this church and never left. At the risk of dating myself, right? I was born that same week when the Uniting Conference was meeting in Dallas in 1968. I was born in a United Methodist hospital in Manila, Mayor Johnston Hospital. My Filipino friends know where that is. I was delivered by a United Methodist doctor. I was born in this church. And there were so many times that I could have left and said, I'm done. And so at a young age, when I decided to be a pastor at 10 years old, I already knew what was in the book of discipline, a little nerdy. I already knew at that time that I was gay. And I could have had a chance to go somewhere else, but I did not. So I'm very proud that at this point, I'm still part of this church that is still trying to figure out the way forward. And it's a family conversation. I'm not going to pretend that I would know, even if I have this role, big fancy title, United Methodist connections, like I would know exactly where we're going. But that's why we're having this conversation. And I've always been asked, so what are the implications of regionalization in this part of our history as a church growing up? And I already said this yesterday, that the United Methodist Church, the Methodist Church, has always been wanting to think about some form of regionalization, of autonomy. In fact, conferences called central conferences already have that form of autonomy. But the worldwide regionalization legislation in the constitutional amendments that we have now, I think is probably one of the best ones for our time. I know because it was a collaboration with folks on the ground. We had a team called the Christmas Covenant team. We had a collaboration with the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters. We sat down together looking at this legislation. You know, it's really great when folks from the grassroots and the institutional church start talking to each other. There's drama. I will not tell you the backstory there, but we also have the connectional table, which already proposed at that time in 2019, a U.S. regional conference, which inspired the Central Conference folks. Well, why not? Let's expand that and have regions. And I want to recognize the Associate Connectional Ministries Officer of the Connectional Table, who's here, Reverend Grace Killian. Did you raise your hand right there? Thank you for being with us. And Connectional Table is also one of our sponsors, which is also historic. So like what I said, we're not growing apart, we're growing up. So what's the implication? I have some bullets, emphasis points here. I believe that regionalization broadens our imagination of what inclusion means. And I'm saying this as a queer person. That my self-interest tells me that I would just care about LGBTQ rights because that's just me. But then every time, I always say this, every time I wake up in the morning, I face myself in the mirror. There's some things there that will always be there. It's not just me being gay. I'm an immigrant. I'm a person of color. English is not my first language. I have hidden disabilities. You know, I was trying so hard to stay away from that dessert table last night because I'm diabetic, right? So regionalization expands that notion of inclusion for reconciling churches as well, for our movement. There used to be a time when the reconciling statements that I've seen before, would be, in this church, whether you're gay or straight, you're welcome here. It's like sing-song, statement. But we've changed, we've moved from there because now we have to add all the letters there. Not just gay or straight, now we have, we recognize the whole spectrum. And now let me read to you the Reconciling Ministries Network foundational statement. And I think this is one way for us to live into dreaming about this new way of being church in this new structure. And I wonder if we're ready to do this. We celebrate God's gift of diversity and value the wholeness made possible in community, equally shared and shepherded by all. We welcome and affirm people of every gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation, who are also of every age, race, ethnicity, physical and mental ability, level of education and family structure, and of every economic, immigration, marital and social status, and so much more. Do you know we've had some churches going through the reconciling process that had issues when we said, why do we have immigration status there? Then they'd have to wrestle with that. Because we want to emphasize that when we talk about inclusion, we're talking about all the barriers that needs to go away. We acknowledge that we live in a world of profound social, economic, and political inequities. And as followers of Jesus, we commit ourselves to the pursuit of justice and pledge to stand in solidarity with all who are marginalized and oppressed. This is a new foundational statement that we're asking new reconciling churches as of September 2020. Yes, and we invite churches that have become reconciling prior to that to affirm it. And we have a study guide for this too. So regionalization, I think, allows us to reimagine inclusion and live into this foundational statement. Now, brass tacks. Regionalization creates a U.S. regional conference that can be affirming in language and practice. And later I will discuss more about how could that be. Because every region has the same legislative authority around certain matters like ordination standards, around chargeable offenses, issues or matters around marriage. There's also a possibility for them to have their own judicial court. Now, central conferences already have that, but the United States, we don't have that. So every time we have our own conversation, it happens with everybody else. It's almost like we're forcing everybody else to, you gotta listen to us. And our agenda is always everybody else's agenda. And I've heard this from Central Conference folks from the Philippines, like, I don't know, why would I sit there and vote on the pension of US clergy, which does not affect me? So now, if we have a US regional conference, we can discuss matters that's within our context, and our siblings in other regions can do the same. Now, people then say, well, now other regions can just be harming LGBTQ people. After General Conference, these are facts. After General Conference, all of our central conferences affirmed the bans and prohibitions that we took out at General Conference. And they are allowed by the Book of Discipline to do that. And even under regionalization, they're allowed to do that. The other side of that is the US region will be allowed to also do the same thing according to its practice. Now, does this end the conversation? Because that's what people are saying. Actually, the conversation's just starting. The conversation is just starting. And people are, like, how do you mean by that? Well, let me talk to you about the importance of relationship building. We've always wanted change to come for how many decades, but when I ask people, and this happened, truth be told, in 2019, people were asking me, could we do this? I'll just spill it, we're a family here. Could we pass the simple plan? And I said, I would love to pass the simple plan because my heart is there as a queer person. But then I had to ask people, where am I going to get the votes for it with central conferences? And nobody could answer my question. Because we really didn't build those relationships of trust. Okay, this is my rant. I was called a sellout by my own siblings. Last year, we passed the simple plan and more. Because now I'm going to go into the strategies, at least organizing principles, in the following years and months. One is the Kairos, this is an organizing principle that I've lived by for the last, 5 years, working on the Christmas Covenant, on worldwide regionalization. The Kairos moment, which is God's moment, as opposed to Chronos, our time. And Derrick has been telling me, like, can you just decenter the time and just let the Spirit flow? The Kairos moment is different for different people in different contexts. It doesn't make other Kairos moments less holy and sacred. Which is also what I said. The power to change hearts and minds and the heartwarming experience is nobody's power. but the Spirit's power. Remember, not by might, not by our strength, but by the Spirit. And in the relationships that I've seen and heard and built, I really realized that, oh yeah, the Kairos moment is different. And I have to respect and wait for it. We can achieve real affirmation, not just superficial respect, if we really build relationships. And so regionalization opens that door for the conversation to continue in a different tone, not like we're clawing at each other, forcing legislation down each other's throats. Another important organizing principle is values-based visioning and strategizing. When we started the Christmas Covenant conversation, we didn't look at the Book of Discipline and said, let's take this out, let's take this out, let's take this out, and this should be amended. We started, and these are folks from the US, from the African continent, from the Philippines. We started with, Kennedy is there, we started with values. We talked about what values we all shared. It was all on the wall. And we affirmed those values. And once we already knew those values and had the vision of what the church we want looks like, then it was easy to go through the Book of Discipline and say, oh, this is not part of this. This is not. And this is people from across the connection doing this. Another organizing principle, which I think is important in this new age of regionalization, is that local people identify their needs and strategize locally. And I always say it, in the organizing, a grassroots organizing that we've always done, nobody parachutes at another place like the knight in shining armor on a white horse. We're going to save you. No, people already are struggling where they are, right? So local people organize where they are. They know their ministry context. They know the culture of leadership. For example, in the US, the bishops are elected for life. In some contexts, in central conferences, the bishops have to be elected every 4 years, which means they play politics, even if they're your allies, because once they're elected, they have to think 4 years from now, I have to be re-elected. So you have to take into consideration that politics. And local people know how to work that. And when we started doing that, and the bishops started working with us, and they have a pulpit to use, right? Then things started moving. And why do you think our central conferences supported regionalization? The bishops, the people, our people on the ground, this was their vision. In fact, one of them was asking me, we're actually more afraid if the US would want this. Because it decenters us. Are we ready for that? So that question I passed to Derrick. Are we ready for this decentering? Are we ready for this new way of building relationships?
I think we might be. I am quite hopeful. And I want to make some suggestions of how we might begin to think about getting there. I'll start with a personal story and then make two suggestions. So in 2019, when leading up to 2019 even, I was in the closet in the Florida conference, had no intentions of ever coming out, and then I had an encounter with Jesus where it's like, nope, you got to come out. Like, no and yes, and y'all know what it's like when Jesus tells you to do something you didn't really plan on doing, right? And one of the reasons that I wasn't ready to come out, and I'm going to say this to my family who is going to love me and speaking my truth, I was afraid of us. I was afraid of stepping vulnerably into this community because there's just some things that are unique about Derrick that I just weren't sure would fit here. And we often know and talk about those feelings in other spaces where we know that we are the minority, the marginalized, the othered in those spaces. But I was a person that was trying to wrestle with often when I got around people that I was supposed to have some kind of affinity with. I was just different enough that I was quite nervous if I came out. Do I have to join RMN? I hope it's okay to be that honest in this space. So, one of the beautiful things that happened to me was meeting an incredible human named Helen Ride. And Helen Ride arrived into my life as a person who probably saw my queerness from 80 kilometers away. But I always felt so accepted by them. I always felt like I was enough around Helen. And Helen gave a presentation at the Wild Goose Festival in 2019. And their presentation essentially, like, we don't have time to unpack it today, but like locked in my brain, oh, Derrick, you fit. You fit. You'll find your place in this thing. Now, it was a beautiful thought in my head, and I knew that I had Helen's support, but I didn't really know how that was going to work out. Then, we started getting ready for what we thought was going to be General Conference 2020, and I began to hang out with Laura and with Randall Miller every week. And y'all, I'm not like them. Like, there are just things about Derrick that are really not like Helen and Laura and Randall. Like, they're not. And yet, they always made room for my difference. And when I was asked to join the board, again, I was like, I'm always late to things. And it's got nothing to do with any of the things that normally might make a human late. My name is Derrick. I'm just always late. Like, that's just how it is. If you love me, you get it. And I was like, I don't know if they want me to be, like, what if I'm always busy, I'm a campus minister, I live on this other rhythm. Like, do they, and Jan has always made room for my gifts. David has always made room for my gifts. I have found my place in this space. And I want to suggest that it could very well be that sometimes people's hesitations towards us, sometimes it's because they need to get over their phobias. But sometimes we're just all so afraid we don't fit, even in the places that we think we're supposed to. Just me? Okay. So here, as we think about the evolution of the United Methodist Church, both real and aspirational, as we think about what regionalization now does for us at a policy level and at a connectional level, I want to make two suggestions about us as a movement. And this is just Derrick making suggestions. These are not incorporated into any strategic plan. We are not taking any notes. This is not law or anything like that. It's just one little black guy saying, hey, maybe we could consider this. Is that all right? Okay. One, I want to invite us to consider that maybe our role as the reconciling movement is to be the nurturers of a coalition. Because here's what I watched the RMN staff and board and friends do leading up to General Conference 2024. We literally nurtured the coalition. This is what Izzy just said. We spent time building relationships with people that we weren't sure if they were fully affirming. And some who are like, I just want us to stop fighting, which is really not enough, right? But we actually did work of relationship building. We did work of bringing people together. And y'all, it was easy as cake, wasn't it? It didn't ask anything of us. It was just this like very simple thing. Let's just all get all the people who at least don't want to, I can just say it, we can erase it from the recording. Let's just get all the people who at the very least don't want to be dicks to queer folk in the room, okay? No, here's what happened over those years. Reconciling individuals said, we're going to nurture this coalition. We're going to recognize that, no, we don't all see it the same way. We're not even all in this for the same reasons, but we're going to figure out how we can try to get on the same page. And yes, we, as Reconciling United Methodists, said it's going to be on us to nurture this thing. When someone is about to walk away, it's going to be on us to see what we need to do to bring them back. If there is a complete disruption, we're going to do that thing that you do in relationships. When there's a rupture, you work towards repair. We did it not because it was done to us. We did it because we realized that our role was so significant. And I'm wondering if that actually is the model for where we move together in this evolving United Methodist Church. So what would it look like if Reconciling United Methodist, queer laity and clergy, allies said, I'm going back to my local church to nurture the coalition. I'm going back to my district, to my annual conference, to whatever jurisdictions might become. And I'm going to go and nurture the coalition. Yes, it's going to ask so much of us. And yet, scriptures tell me I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So that's one suggestion. You don't have to take it. It's a suggestion. Here's the second suggestion. I wonder if we could also then be the folks who recognize the spectrum within the coalition. Because here's the thing, we cannot all do the same things, and we should not all do the same things. We have some friends in our movement, yes, pass them the mic every time. And then we have some friends in our movement that if we love them, do not ever give them the mic. And it doesn't mean that they're not a part of the coalition, doesn't mean that they're not a part of us. They have gifts to bring to the table. It's just not the kind of gift that you give the mic to, right? So there's a spectrum of gifts, right? There are those who are incredible at listening deeply. Let's make sure they're in the room when people are telling the truth. There are those of us who really understand the politics. They get it. They eat it for breakfast. That's who needs to be in the room when decisions are getting made. There are those of us who might be like me who really just want to sit in their hotel room and just think all day. And then at 5:13 p.m., I'll send an email that I should have sent weeks ago. But I'll send an email, and it'll have one thing that's helpful. And I fought hard for that one thing, y'all. And it's my gift. There's a spectrum of gifts that I think we could begin to pay attention to. There's a spectrum of capacities. And here's the deal. Some of us have been in this work a long time, and we actually do not have the physical ability to stay in it in the same ways. We honor that, we recognize that, and so that means that there's some of us who just got here who need to get on with it. The capacities are different. Some of us have the ability, yes, to sit at a general conference for 2.5 weeks. And some of us, man, 3 days at annual conference is asking a whole lot. So let's think about our different capacities, and let's not see one as versus another. Let's not have them warring with each other. Let's figure out who are the folks who have the capacity to give 40 years to this movement. And let's make sure that we are setting them up for a long haul journey. And who are the folks that, praise God, you got 5 good years in you? How do we make sure that we give you the space that you need? The spectrum of capacities, and finally the spectrum of context, and this is where I'll just be very, very quick, but also try to be concise here. Like, there is the space within your local church. If we do not have incredible reconciling congregations, my friends, the movement doesn't have legs to stand on. And so it doesn't actually matter in many ways if language changes and continues to change in our book of discipline. If people aren't finding Jesus and reconciling congregations, we actually aren't doing a whole lot. We've got a book of discipline for a church that doesn't exist. So some of us have got to find our context in the beautiful, dynamic, but sometimes mundane, Sunday to Sunday work. Amen, lay leaders? Amen, pastors? Yeah. Local church, districts, that's a context. How do we gather reconciling United Methodists and reconciling congregations together in our districts so that we are actually thinking about the context and the different groups of people that we literally live next to, our neighbors? How are we thinking about that at the annual conference level? How are we making sure that I'm so glad we've got queer task force and standing committees, but y'all, our committees love to just become shells. Our committees love to just become words and standing rules. And we just put people in leadership positions who don't have the capacity to lead. That only happens in Florida, actually. The annual conference is a context. Okay, could we be the people who look at the spectrum of gifts and capacities and context and begin to look at what faithfulness looks like for each one of us so that we can all play the part that we need to play? Because I think ultimately the reconciling movement has the ability to model, of many things, regionalization for the United Methodist Church. I actually think that we have the ability to do it, but I don't know if we're ready yet for it, because it actually is going to mean that we have to act differently in our church than we have. And one of the biggest things that we have to do as United Methodists in the United States is be very okay with not being the decision makers for the whole church. Americans aren't good at that. US citizens aren't always good at recognizing that every single human being on the planet has autonomy to make their own decisions. And so I do think that we could actually model regionalization for the United Methodist Church, because in many ways, we've been trying to model inclusion for the United Methodist Church. We have work to do there, yes, but we've done it. And I think we can do more of it, and I think we could do that for regionalization as well. Okay, I've said too many words, Izzy. Take it from here.
Wow. I think you're really more gracious than me. Talking about strategy, I'm just going to go to the U.S. Regional Conference first, but I want to show a video of one of our board members, Karen Prudente, who is the treasurer of the Connectional Table and is executive director of Kapatiran Kaunlaran Foundation, which is a social justice agency in the Philippines, also a member of the board, and also the president of the National Association of Filipino American United Methodists. So, I want her in her video, will talk about just a little bit of the U.S. Regional Conference, because I think we'll focus on that for now. What can happen through it. What can we do to get there? So are we ready to play that video? It's a short 3-minute video. Let's do it. Volume. Karen's video is talking about the U.S. Regional Conference, and Karen was part of the Christmas Covenant team, and also we worked together on the final piece of legislation. The reason why I said that I think you're more gracious, because I heard it said earlier that our liberation depends on who is at the seat of power. And it's hard when, you have to deal with Robert's Rules of Order and voting. Right? And pieces of legislation. And even if they're pieces of legislation, we had to vote and take them out from that book, right? But it's true. Real things happen and people meet Jesus when they go through the doors of our local churches. I don't think people go to general conference or even annual conference to experience Jesus. Intentionally, probably. I'm not going to bring probably a new believer to that setting, especially, maybe in the future we'll have a general conference that's all about exciting speakers and Bible studies and less debates. So a U.S. regional conference will have a lot of power that will allow us to do the ministry, especially of LGBTQ inclusion in our context. It will allow us to have more affirming language. It will allow us to have a supplemental book of worship that would have rituals for same-sex marriages, naming ceremonies for our trans siblings, all the good stuff. We could probably have a supplemental book of hymns that would have inclusive language in it. Rituals that we would want for our context. And we could do that. I just don't know when the U.S. Regional Conference will convene. That's the fuzzy thing. I was talking with Grace earlier, and we were thinking, oh, the bishops need to finish ratification, then we'll probably get to that point. So are we ready with Karen's video? Thank you. Okay, let's try it.
Hi, I'm Karen Prudente, a member of the board of Reconciling Ministries Network. I'm also the treasurer of the Connectional Table. During General Conference, I was an alternate delegate for the New York Annual Conference. And a member of the Christmas Covenant, which helped really write about regionalization and was perfected through our work as a team with the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters and the Connectional Table. Well, in a few months, we will know about the results of the ratification of worldwide regionalization, which we hope will be positive, because then officially the U.S. Regional Conference will be established. What does that mean? Well, the U.S. is now taken out from the center of how we do United Methodism and is around the table with the other regional conferences beyond the United States. This will mean also that there'll be regional offices around the world, like the one in the Philippines in Manila, which already has offices for the Asia Pacific region, UMCOM, and General Board of Global Ministries to start. So this will probably happen in the other regions. What will also be interesting is this whole study regarding jurisdictions, which only exist right now in the United States. Will it be for all or for none? So that will be a study during this quadrennium too, once the U.S. Regional Conference is approved. Otherwise, every regional conference can adapt its own regional book of disciplines as long as it does not contradict with the U.S. Constitution of the United Methodist Church and the constitutional amendments approved by the Jurisdictional Council. So let's see what happens as we organize the U.S. Regional Conference, which we hope will take place in 2026 or 27, so that we're prepared for General Conference as we gather in 2028. Thank you.
So what can we accomplish through this U.S. Regional Conference? I already mentioned some of them, right? And I think we can get there if we do grassroots work from our from our local churches, our annual conferences, and right now we have 20 plus annual conferences that are openly supporting this movement. We also, or at least supporting this convocation. We also have 19 conferences that said we're ready to have a committee, which I'm hoping would not just be a committee in paper or name, but would actually, like what Derrick said, would really do the work. We're ready to put forward proposals on a supplemental book of discipline. That's what we could do. But I think hand in hand with that, and this is the most important part, hand in hand with these concerns locally, we still live in a connection, right? In fact, we are in connection. And so it would be important for all of us to understand, and sometimes that's the problem, we're tired of listening. Let me call on two good friends and siblings who will join us here, and let me introduce them to you so that we could hear exactly what's happening where they are in their own contexts. I think there are some things that we need to know and we need to understand, and I'm hoping that you would have that openness. Let me call on Jennifer Ferrarisa Meneses and Reverend Kennedy Muita. Jennifer is the Executive Secretary of the Board of Women's Work of the Philippine Central Conference of the UMC. She also serves as the Mission Liaison in Asia for United Women in Faith, a member of the Executive Committee and Board of Directors of the General Commission on the Status Role of Women, and Vice Chairperson for Women of the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. Jen is a lay member of the West Middle Philippines Annual Conference. And Reverend Kennedy Muita, there you go. Kennedy is the senior pastor of First UMC in Moheto in Kenya, the first reconciling church in the African continent. He also serves as the Kenya-Ethiopia Conference's Director of Connectional Ministries and Volunteers in Mission. He was also a former RMN board member. Let's give it a hand for Kennedy. So I'd love for both of you to give a bit of an overview of where you are in your context. So let's start with Ken. Oh, the video is coming up, yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm asking whether it is afternoon or morning. This afternoon.
Yeah, it's
morning.
afternoon now.
Yeah. Well, Kennedy, as Izzy rightly said, in my context, that I would say that one of our theological foundation that has made us move and make more strides and steps towards inclusion and towards the process of regionalization along is based on Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. We say that, so in all things do to others what you will have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. So realize that sometimes I come from a very, very, very hostile environment where we call it traditional. But in essence, sometimes I ask myself, what is so traditional in it? And for that reason, a church has always been used as a tool of harm to people. And we have used the Bible many times to be a tool to perpetrate a lot of harm, not only to the LGBT person, but even to women, children, and all the people, the poor, and all those sorts of lives. So our congregation in Kenya, we went through a long journey from 2011 up to 2019 when we first voted to be members of the reconciling ministry. But the journey has been a long journey towards understanding the human suffering, what we go through, and how religion has really been a tool to perpetrate all those forms of injustice. So I believe, we still believe, and I believe that we as a church, if you want to be true to what we believe, to be a true body of Christ, then we have to disarm all arms that cause harm to our colleagues. Remember, we can have a good law, we can have a constitution, we can amend the book of discipline, but if we don't live to show love among ourselves, it will just be written on black and white, but not in practice. So we are working to see how we can create environments wherever in our safe spaces be more welcoming in all spheres.
So I believe there's a video that Reverend Kennedy would like us to show.
Hamasi. I am proud to be a bisexual pastor. I am he, them. Currently, I'm serving at First United Methodist Church, Moheto, and I found peace, I found grace. I was refuged at First United Methodist Church, Moheto, which is a reconciling congregation church. I am from western part of Kenya, and in Migori County, we have an LGBTQ fellowship. I am the chairperson, and currently I'm proud to record that we have 252 members who are gays and bisexuals. In this team, we are facing hostility. We are facing discrimination, torture. We are facing arrest from the police. Some of our members are being murdered in the society, and some of us, we are HIV positive. Please keep us in prayers. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, let's not rest on our laurels. That just shows us we got work to do. So, Jen, could you talk more about our context?
Mabuhay, I'm Jen, pronouns she, her, cisgender, female. I think I have to say this first. Marami pong salamat. Thank you so much for welcoming us, your siblings from the Philippines. On behalf of my two Filipino colleagues and myself, we want to express, I'm about to cry, our deep gratitude for the gift of being here. It is truly a blessing, a wonderful gift, and a powerful testimony to be surrounded by a cloud of LGBTQ witnesses, courageous, faithful, and full of grace. Since our arrival last Monday, we have felt your radical hospitality and the warmth of this welcoming community. And every moment in this space has reminded us of the sacredness of connection, the power of shared stories and struggles, and the hope born out of solidarity. Thank you, Reconciling Ministries Network, for your intentionality in recognizing the presence and participation of central conferences in this sacred and trusted space, and in this strong spirit-led movement of healing, justice, and love. I serve for and with the Board of Women's Work of the Philippine Central Conference, so it's a program agency of the Central Conference that works for and with all women in the United Methodist Church in the Philippines. And when we say all women, we have our deaconesses, clergy women, female clergy spouses, and members of the Women's Society of Christian Service, similar to the UMW or United Women in Faith here in the US. And our programs and ministries focus on women's empowerment, organizational development, peace and justice work, as well as accompaniment and advocacy with people living with HIV, persons with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and victim survivors of gender-based violence, both within the church and in the wider community. Last November 2024, during our Central Conference regular session, where we elect our bishops and deliberate important legislations, 3 important resolutions on creating safe, sacred space in the Philippine Central Conference for the LGBTQ+ community were approved. This was submitted by the young women leaders of the A-Women, the Young Women Program arm of the Board of Women's Work. These resolutions represent our continuing commitment to build a more inclusive, just, and compassionate church. First, creating safe, sacred space through developing and promoting ministries and resources that educate congregations and church leaders toward just and compassionate responses for and with the LGBTQ plus community. So this resolution focuses on fostering a welcoming and inclusive environment within our congregations, ministries, and broader church structures. And it calls for the development of educational materials addressing sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, you see, were very basic, and other LGBTQ plus concerns. And the goal is to promote deeper understanding of the lived experiences of LGBTQ plus individuals and to equip the church to respond with empathy, justice, and grace. The second resolution, creating sacred space through supporting the basic human rights of all people, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. So this resolution affirms our ongoing commitment to confront hate, stigma, and discrimination against our LGBTQ siblings. It encourages support for laws and policies that uphold LGBTQ rights, including the passage of the SOGI Equality Bill. It's a bill being deliberated now in the Philippines, which stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, and Gender Expression, SOGI. So this bill seeks to protect individuals from discrimination in employment, education, healthcare, and public services, and aims to ensure equal rights and opportunities for all. And the third resolution, creating safe, sacred space by addressing gender-based violence and sexual misconduct. This resolution emphasizes the need to create safe and empowering spaces for all persons, not only LGBTQ, by eliminating all forms of sexism and abuse. It calls for strengthened education and capacity building to effectively address gender-based violence, as well as the establishment of clear boundaries, mechanisms for accountability, and the pursuit of just and healing resolutions. So these important resolutions speak not only to our hopes, they speak to the realities we face in the Philippine Central Conference, realities of exclusion, silence, and struggle when it comes to gender justice and inclusion. But they also speak to our collective courage to name the harm, to confront the stigma, and to declare that every person, including our LGBTQ siblings, deserves to be seen, heard, and loved in the fullness of who they are. So by adopting all these resolutions, our church is beginning to say what many of us have been longing to hear, that the work of justice is holy work, and that creating safe and sacred space is not just a program, it is a gospel calling. Thank you.
Whew. Yeah, that's hard work. And I'm really very, I was there when they passed those I never thought those resolutions would even pass. So, yeah, grateful. So for both of you,
Are we about to do some
question.
Okay, so we're about to, Izzy is actually about to ask our friends a few questions, but you might have some questions for them as well. And so Angie and Kip as well are going to be walking around with some note cards that you can write your questions. We obviously don't have all the time in the rest of this plenary, but we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can. So if you want to write those questions down, and then we're going to grab them and get to as many of them as we can. Again, these are going to be questions for Kennedy and Jen. We'll talk about our questions as U.S. folk at another time, but let's honor their presence with us.
Well, when you get to the contextual conversations, you could discuss a lot of, and hopefully the conversations here also inform that. So, what are the challenges and needs? Because you gave us an overview. What are the challenges and needs? Kennedy and then Jen.
I would say there are more challenges and needs in our context. I just gave an overview of my context, that is in Kenya. And I would say that what we go through in Kenya is almost the same thing going through across Africa. Because apart from South Africa, where same-sex marriage is legal, all other countries in Africa, it is illegal. And so it becomes even illegal just to affirm that you are gay. Some countries have even come up with laws which are very punitive, like Uganda, in Rwanda. So you realize that, so the persons, the LGBT community, go through hard moments, including the allies. So some of the challenges that I will point out, which cut across our African continent, is the cultural norms and also religious conservativeness. I always say that we are raised in a given theology, which was given to us by the colonial missionaries. And because of that, you realize that it takes a time to really come to understand, to learn, to have more dialogue for people to really understand the current situation. So the cultural norms around LGBT issue, subjects, and also the religious conservativity based on what we were handed over to us by the colonials, missionaries, that is actually what is eating on us in a large extent. Sometimes, somebody somewhere said, if you want to hide something from an African, hide it in a book. So many people don't even have time to go and even study and understand what is the reality, what is happening. I saw that shortly before the General Conference. When we were planning for General Conference about the legislations, many people never went through to really understand what is it in the worldwide realization. And that is why GMC is getting a lot of roots in causing problems in our continent, because they are really speculating rumors. The next, another challenge we have is the legal restrictive environments, the laws of the land, which criminalizes LGBT persons, leading to safety concerns and marginalization. Because sometimes you realize that when the law of the land, like in my country, Penal 263, is only up to last year but one, when the High Court ruled that now the LGBT group can register their NGO. Now we can have NGOs for LGBTI in Kenya, but still the law does not allow same-sex marriage. You realize that because of that, you find that religious groups, the mainstream religious groups, and other Pentecostal groups, take it as an advantage to really speculate and really preach rumors and preach a lot of hate speech and hate sermons against. For example, myself as Pastor Ken, when we first began the journey of inclusivity in 2011, the congregation I was leading actually went almost 3/4 left. But right now, I lead the biggest congregation in the whole conference. What you just saw was our congregation. That was just a normal ordinary Sunday worship service. And the one who was leading the worship service was also gay. And so we welcome each and every person. We also have, because of the laws, legal restrictives, he mentioned about 256. Those are persons we do fellowship with them in hotel, in private places, because they don't want to come out publicly. We've had many young people, many people being killed simply for identifying as gay or identifying as lesbian. And some have been raped, and especially the lesbians, being raped so that they change their status, being forced. I tell you, people have gone through a lot of suffering. So those are some of the challenges we have. We also have another challenge, limited education. Limited education makes people fail to think beyond the box, out of the box. So you only think of what you've been hearing, what you've heard, rumors. You fail to really think and make your own informed decision. And that is why we are out now to see how do we invest in the future of the society by simply looking into our education system. Can we have an education system which can now help the young people as they grow up to be able to think and critically and open up? And that's why we as FUMC Moheto, we are now working on a school to ensure that as the young people grow up, the people we are able to. No, the challenge we have is that the colonial people, our colonial masters gave us a half-handed education, which does not allow us to think, but to cram. For example, you spend 4 years cramming the parts of an insect. And then at the end of the day, you see that you have a degree in biology by simply cramming the head of parts of an insect, the head, thorax, and abdomen. And so because that kind of education curriculum is also questionable. We also come into potential conflicts within congregations and broader society that can hinder open dialogues and acceptance. We have some religious congregations who think that they are more spiritual than we, the Methodists, and especially more so who are affirming. So sometimes you find that because of those are some of the challenges that we face, that I've gone through. And I want to believe that the same challenge is cutting across. And that is what makes some of our allies who will be willing to come up and open up. And I always say this, let me just say this so that it can come out of me. I affirm that LGBT is not a condition that people choose to be. It's not a Western culture. I always tell my people in my context, in my conference, differentiate culture from whom a person is. When you talk of culture, is something that you can learn and unlearn. But the condition is, it is inherent. So that's because of lack of education, proper education to enable us to understand that. So I would really read a lot of challenges, but let me just stop at that point for the interval of time. Thank you.
Yeah, very briefly, we're still facing stigma and social pressure. So there's still a fear of speaking up, especially among our clergy and lay leaders. So we have this in the Philippines, what we call rainbow tagging in a negative sense, like all the supporters and advocates for LGBT rights and gender justice are being rainbow tagged, being persecuted, being condemned. And then we recognize that we lack theological resources and education. So there's a very limited access to contextual Filipino language theological materials that affirm LGBTQ+ people. And many church leaders and members simply lack the tools to understand LGBTQ+ issues through a justice-oriented, faith-rooted lens. And like in Africa, we're also still facing cultural and religious conservatism. The Philippine church, remain being influenced by conservative theology and cultural norms that view LGBTQ+ identities as sinful or deviant. So that's it.
We have some questions from Derrick. Do you have any questions? Maybe we'll entertain one question from the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, friends, for these questions. I'm going to ask each one of you a question from the floor really quickly. So, Reverend Kennedy, we recognize that there are a lot of funds that used to come from our U.S. government that are no longer being sent around the world because of the current administration. So some of us are curious if that has impacted work in your local context, in your annual conference and region? And then is there something that you can suggest to us as Reconciling United Methodists that we might be able to do in response?
Yeah. The fund suspension by the U.S. government, especially the U.S. aid, has greatly affected the health sector. We run a clinic, a hospital. What's the best term to call it? Hostel, clinic?
Clinics? Hospitals?
Clinic. Yeah. Yeah. And you realize that right now we've been having challenges with ARVs, especially for the HIV victims, because we were depending heavily on U.S. aid supply to give the ARV for the people living with HIV/AIDS, and also vaccines. So the health sector has been greatly affected by the suspension, the fund suspension. Up to now, this BCG vaccine is actually out of stock across the country. And so we are likely to see a case where we might be having reproductive diseases in the near future if nothing happens. Yeah. So how best can we do this? If there are ways we can be able to support, especially on health sectors, that would be great, because that is one area that has heavily been affected by the fund suspension by the government, by this government in my country.
Thank you. Jen, let me ask you this. We recognize that there are many countries that it is still, in many countries outside the US, it is still illegal to identify as LGBTQ. And even where it may be legal, it may not be safe. And so how do we support our siblings in the central conferences, specifically our LGBTQIA siblings who live outside the US, and also those who are supporting them, those who are trying to create safe spaces? How do we be good allies to the work that you're doing in your context?
For me, accompaniment is very important. Our allies, Reconciling Ministries Network, Reconciling Churches, our Reconciling United Methodists can offer solidarity, presence, encouragement, without imposing Western models or language. And there's this important question in terms of giving support. This important question: how can we support what you're already doing? And we've been practicing in the Philippines the concept of people, voices at the margins. Those who are in the margins, the people in the margins, like the women, the LGBTQ, their voice, their gifts and their strengths are being placed at the center. So it means in all levels of our LGBTQ justice work and inclusion, they are all fully involved. So I think that's one.
So here's a question for both of you. What do we need to know as Reconciling United Methodists, because our audience here is primarily folks from this country. What do we need to know as Reconciling United Methodists, Reconciling Congregations, Ministries, churches, that you would like us to know where you're coming from in terms of doing ministry? Because you're in totally different context, right? There might be some, may openness somewhere, maybe closed elsewhere. But there are things that probably we don't know that I think you know more and you want us to know. And this is the time for us for you to share that with us.
I think for the Philippines, our work for LGBTQ justice and inclusion should be done in a non-colonial way. Meaning, for the Philippines, we have to reclaim our pre-colonial sacred histories. Queerness is not foreign to our cultures. It was part of them long before colonization. You know, in the Philippines, the babaylan. Can you say it with me? Babaylan. Yeah. The babaylan were respected spiritual leaders, often women or feminized men. And they held healing and community power. And many indigenous cultures globally held fluid understandings of gender and sexuality, and erased by colonial Christianity and legal systems. So, to affirm LGBTQ plus persons today is to reclaim a spiritual legacy that honors God, diversity, and design from the beginning. So I think that's one. I have my script. I really prepared for this. Second, listen to local voices. Let justice be contextual. Not all models of LGBTQ plus activism fit all settings. Yes. Justice in my country, in the Philippines, will look different than in the US justice or Africa justice. Local queer leaders, especially youth, theologians, artists, and clergy should shape the movement. And our role is not to import strategies, but to empower contextual ministry shaped by grace, listening, and mutual discernment. And our Wesleyan tradition offers powerful tools for justice rooted in grace and social holiness. We can explore, not only us, but together, queer, feminist, and liberation theologies that speak to the sacred worth of LGBTQ plus people. Together, we can lift up scriptural interpretations that center love, compassion, and the life of Christ. And together, we can honor the sacramental power of community. God's grace is for all. So a just theology is one that heals, liberates, and welcomes to the table. I've been hearing intersectionality since we arrived and attended some of the workshops. And for this, we need to build intersectional solidarity within and beyond the church. Meaning LGBTQ plus justice is tied to broader struggles for human dignity. So we must connect with work on gender justice, poverty, indigenous rights, disability inclusion, and more. We cannot isolate LGBTQ as a separate issue, LGBTQ justice as a separate issue. We are present in every justice movement. So when we uphold LGBTQ justice, and not upholding environmental justice or vice versa. So there's something wrong with that. So justice in the church must reflect justice in the world and vice versa. And last, we honor language, culture, and local expressions. Faithful ministry must speak the heart language of the people. Here in the US, we have gay, lesbian terms. We also have local terms for gay, bakla. Can you say it with me? Bakla. Tomboy or lesbian. Trans-Pinay. Or bading. Yeah. So these local terms, they carry unique cultural meaning. So, yeah. LGBTQ plus justice is not about abandoning traditions. It is about reclaiming it for healing. It is not just about inclusion. It is about decolonization. And it is not about importing movements like what you have now and what we are building, in our context, in Africa context. It is about growing them in our soil, with our people, under God's grace. Amen.
Thank you. I have one here. Wow. One thing that you need to know about us in Africa is that we are a communal society. We think in a community before we think as individual. So that is an area that I really want you people to understand that we are because you are. Because you are, so we are. The Ubuntu spirit. It is not, I think in the US, it is, you start with me before you go to you. But with us, it is us, then it is us, then me. That is why it becomes difficult to culturally break through some of the things. Because we look into and say, as a family, does this apply to us all? So some of the things that we need to learn together are almost similar to what my colleague have just said, but let me go through it. That let us learn to listen, learn and listen. By understanding the specific missional and cultural context of each region. Many times people ask me, I have a friend in Nigeria, and I'm from Kenya. Africa is a whole continent. It's not a single country. And each country has different cultures. For example, my country, Kenya, we have 42 tribes, meaning 42 different cultures. Same thing happened. I don't know how many are in Nigeria, how many tribes are in Nigeria. I don't know how many are in Congo, but we are thousands and thousands. So because of that, we need to listen to the story of each people and understand what is happening. So when we talk of colonial, to me, colonialism, my understanding is when you want to impose, to let me think like you. You want me to do what you want me, you want me to do what you want me to do. That becomes colonial. So when we listen, we give the people opportunity to say, look here, we are doing this, we are walking this walk. Can you walk with us? So sometimes when we say that walk with us in this walk, we are not saying that you are not becoming colonizing us. No, we just want to journey with you. Not to follow you, but we walk alongside one another. So it is high time for us to listen one another. We need to listen from you, we also listen from us, so that we can see how do we journey together this journey. Where do we have mountains? Where do we have plains? Where do we have, how can we navigate through this together? Second thing is mutual respect and equity. That will actually nurture a holistic relationship amongst ourselves. Now that we are going to regional conferences, there is a need to develop that kind of mutual respect amongst our regions, amongst our people, amongst us, as we do ministry together. By simply understanding, now if you understand from where I began from, that we the African, we think as a community before we think as individual. So when you understand that we are thinking as a community before thinking as individual, then we respect that, and then we can walk alongside together. So we need to culture that and equity. We also need to look into what are the shared goals amongst ourselves. What do we share in common? How can we nurture this so that the ministry becomes actually relevant to all sides? Let me say this. Was it last year? I was here in October. October, you have what do you have? You have what we call what? Where we have these skeletons hanged.
Halloween.
Halloween.
Okay. I don't celebrate.
For the first time I was in this continent doing Halloween. And I went to one of the church, actually, it was in Madison, not this Madison here, in New Jersey. And I was given time to preach. It took me time to really gather myself, because in my respecting the cultural competency, in my context, if you go and get skeletons any place, you are a witch. You are a witch. They'll burn your house. They'll burn you. Actually, literally, they will just kill you because skeletons. So, but I asked the pastor, what is happening here? What am I seeing here? Can you help me understand? And he told, no, this Halloween. And when we went to the spa, there were also even more scary ones. So you realize I had to understand the context. So when we understand the context and where we come from, we will do ministry in a better way. Yeah. I will be able to actually accommodate one another and embrace one another. Responsible resourcing. As RMN, I will say that we have done good work of doing a lot of advocacy and resourcing. I will say that can we continue doing that, a lot of resource work, so that at the end of the day, we are able to help people understand. Don't blame a person when a person does not think like you, when he or she doesn't laugh like you. But he or she is another world, and we're in another world. So when we help one another to be more in the resources, when we have the resources, we are able to develop resources that can help people understand more, both literal resources and other forms of resources to meet some of the needs. Yeah, because many times when I share with people on the needs that we have on the ground, like right now we're talking about fund suspension around HIV/AIDS issue, people say that, but we don't want to be colonial. We don't want to be colonial. Yes, that's not being colonial. That is walking along with people in their pain. In their pain. Hello?
Yeah.
Are we together?
Yeah.
Walking with people in their pain is not being colonial. It becomes colonial when you tell people, go there, do this. But when you journey with the people in their pain, it's a healing moment. So these are some of the things that I really would like us to understand, you to understand on our side. When you understand that from our side, we will be able to journey together well. And let me say the worst experience I had in 2019 at St. Louis. I was with Anne Craig. When we were invited into one of the rooms, and when they saw my black color, they literally pushed me out and said, you are the people who have failed us. It was painful. Then I felt, oh, this is what people feel when they're discriminated. And when the people you think are with you are discriminating you. It took time for Richard, is over there, and Neil Christian to convince the team that no, Kennedy is one of us. Please, let us journey with people. Journey with people. And never look down upon any the people. Even if a person hates you or has done something wrong against you, please take time to understand. Give the person time to learn, to heal up. Things will turn. Thank you.
So I'm going to invite Laura Young to come on up to the stage, who's going to lead us, help us get to our next space. But can we thank Kennedy and Jen for sharing so much wisdom? Yeah. So let me also say, and then I'll pass it to Laura, a reminder, this was said in the last plenary as well, let's just remember that Kennedy and Jen are not the whole of United Methodism Central Conference. Conferences. There are friends in the room who also have perspectives who live outside the United States. There are United Methodists that we can easily connect to via email and WhatsApp and Facebook message. And so I hope, friends, that we as Reconciling United Methodists will not wait till there's another panel to ask some questions and to hold space for those answers. Yeah? Okay. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Derrick. All right, I'm going to do a super quick flyover to remind us about our contextual conversations. And we've got some slides, right, that are going to help us with this. At past convos, we've included some breakout conversations by jurisdiction. And those were helpful, they were productive, and they also included some struggle rooted in how different our various regions really are. I mentioned this yesterday, but I think it's important to remember that the whole of the southern jurisdictions aren't behind the curve. And there are actually pockets. There are pockets in the South that are really warming my heart. And the whole of the Western jurisdiction isn't all on the same page either. That's a myth. As we move forward, especially toward worldwide regionalization, it could be really important to let go of those old stereotypes. So this year we thought it would be helpful to host some conversations based on how your particular ministry context is currently responding to this unique moment in our post-GC2024 reality. So we've created 4 groups, 4 different contexts. Excuse me, some of you have made these decisions already if you saw the pre-convo survey, but if you haven't, that's fine. We've got some descriptors here that will kind of give you an idea of the context for each of these 4 groups. The first part of the statement would be, in a post-GC2024 reality, my conference is acknowledging change, but prioritizing conflict avoidance. We're acknowledging progress, but slow to take next steps. Or we're all in and taking the lead. So those are the 3 groups. We visited with our Central Conference guests in advance and offered them all kinds of options, and they've chosen to visit with a few specific leaders. The RMN board chair, I believe, David's going to go with them, as well as Derrick and Izzy. So they've got their room assignment, so they know where they're going. The other room assignments, are they up there? Oh, they are. Awesome. Okay, perfect. So you can kind of choose, if you haven't already done that, what best describes what your ministry context is doing, how they're responding to this current moment. It's not a perfect description, we know, but just choose what you think is right for you, and that will be your next location. So we've got a few minutes. You can run by the water fountain or whatever you need to do on the way to whatever location works for you. All 3 groups are going to talk about the same 3 questions, and those 3 questions are, what are the current challenges in your ministry context? 2, what are the current opportunities in your ministry context? And 3, what educational resources would be most helpful? Every room is already going to have a couple of facilitators, co-facilitators, going to help you navigate this conversation. They're going to ask for a volunteer note taker to kind of capture the big ticket items. And then somebody, I hope, will bring those to me sometime later today or in the morning. So that's it. You've got a few minutes to take a quick break. We were slotted for an hour and to wrap up at 6:30. So there's time for you to take a quick break on the way to your next location and still get started and end on time. Do you need to say a few things? Okay, awesome.
Thanks, Laura. I have one more announcement. YK has asked me to announce that if you are interested in being a part of the choir tomorrow for closing worship, it's a pickup choir, which means it'll be music that you'll likely know, but we will meet here at 8:30 tomorrow morning with YK to rehearse that pickup music for the choir for closing worship. Thanks all.